Okay, good, thank you. It should say recording on your end. I think it's recording.
Yeah, well, it says the stop recording button is lit up, so I guess that means it's recording.
Okay, yes, it is good. Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. This is Kate. Okay, this is Kate here with another video. I hope everybody's doing well. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. We have Jim Kavanagh of the Polemicist blog, and you're interviewed by Garland Nixon and Dr. Wilmer Leon. Podcast is with Loud and Clear. Really interesting stuff. And you've had some really fascinating recent videos on Rumble about RFK Jr. and the Ukraine war. Really fascinating takes on it. So I thought we just first started with, and now, by the way, I'm going to put this video on Rumble. I'll have it on YouTube as well. Because of YouTube censorship, I may have to edit it somewhat, unfortunately. YouTube took down one of my videos when I questioned the election results. So I'm going to have the full video on Rumble. I hate censorship, but it's everywhere these days. So RFK Jr., now you had a fascinating take on this. The Democrats got themselves in a bind. They have Joe Biden, who's really low, his popularity is sinking. It's like between 36 and 40%, or maybe even less than that. And Kamala Harris is deeply unpopular. And apparently Biden says he wants to run again, and they're stuck. There's a theory going around that the documents that were found in Biden's house and his garage, I think there were 3 groups of documents, that were classified documents that were found, that one faction of the Democratic Party was using that to push him out. Like if he says he's going to run again, to embarrass and humiliate him. That apparently, if that's true, that's been dropped. Yeah, it's dropped out of the news cycle. You just don't hear about it anymore, which is kind of strange. So anyways, wanting your take on this, and you seem to think there's some interesting possibilities with RFK Jr. I don't know if they'll let him. They may insert Gavin Newsom. There's talk of doing that. That would be really difficult for them to do, maneuver him in. The Democrats don't have anyone with a following. They slap down anyone with a hint of populism. They sabotaged Sanders, Dennis Kucinich years ago. They slap down anyone with any mass appeal, so they're stuck.
Yeah. Let me just correct one thing you said. I appeared with Garland Nixon and Dr. Wilmer Leon. It's on the show is The Critical Hour.
Right, that's right.
Loud and Clear, yeah. So the situation with RFK, well, as you say, really, it's the situation with the Democrats. Yeah. I think RFK Jr. has made a bet, and I think he's right, that Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee in November 2024. I don't believe Joe Biden's going to last that long. If they can keep Joe Biden propped up in any kind of reasonable way on stage, they will keep him in there. They will fight off anything, right? But I think it's becoming much less likely that he's going to last until 2024. For some of the reasons, there's his mental state, which is clearly not good, and it's not going to get any better. And these things can develop, especially as they've gone on for some time, they can develop very quickly. So I think the state, Joe Biden's mental state is one thing. The other thing is, as you say, there are potential scandals with Joe Biden himself that really have been kept well under wraps. That Hunter Biden laptop was kept under wraps for over a year, and they finally have to admit it's real. The stuff that's on that regarding Hunter and regarding the family situation. I mean, with Joe Biden's daughter saying she felt she would take showers at night because she didn't want Joe Biden coming into the shower with her when she was a teenage girl. This is on that laptop. Plus, you have the potential, the Republicans are claiming they have tapes of Joe Biden, bribery with the guy from Burisma. So those are all things that could pop up, and things from those levels could pop up at any moment, right? And the Democrats have to be aware that that's there. They are aware of it. Then there's the Ukraine war, which is going to go badly, and it's going to be another disaster, worse than Afghanistan. And so all kinds of things are going to happen. There's the possibility of another serious banking crisis in the United States. Very real possibility that could happen before the end of the year, certainly before November 2024. So the situation with Joe Biden himself and with the country and the world is such that things are going to happen that I think are going to make it impossible for them to push Biden forward. As you say, this polls show that most Democrats do not want Joe Biden to run again. Right. So you're facing this situation. So into this situation, RFK Jr. has decided to insert himself. And, you know, he's seeing what's going on now. They're going to fight against him in every way. The main problem they have with RFK Jr. is, and you know, I support, and, you know, I remember when I did my first interview with you, you asked me about my policy, my stance on vaccinations, because you had been reading my Facebook, etc. Well, since then, you know, that's now become an issue for everybody, right? And everybody on the left. And I support RFK Jr.'s work on that in children's health defense. I've always have. So I've always admired him in that sense. But really, what everybody, even people who disagree with him about his stance on vaccination, can see, and it's a pole of attraction and something that people admire, is that he stood up for something that he thought was right for years, even though he took a lot of crap for it. And he really did take a lot of crap for it, ridicule and isolation from his family even. And he didn't need to do that. He's a guy that didn't need to play that game. So the main problem with RFK Jr. from the Democratic Party point of view right now is that, A, he's someone who's shown he can stand up for something if he thinks is right, even if he takes a political hit for it. B, he's open-minded and first of all, he's intelligent. He knows what he's talking about. People start going after him about this vaccine. He knows what he's talking about, and he's a smart. So he's intelligent. He's honest. He's open-minded. He'll go talk to everybody. He said, "You have a question for me? Ask the question. You disagree with me? Tell me what I said is wrong." People see that. They like that. So so he's coming in. To that's the kind of thing the Democrats don't like. They want someone who's going to follow the party line and, you know, tell everybody else to shut up and just do what you have to say. So they don't like that, but a lot of people like that. And he's coming into the situation with a higher popularity rating, a higher favorability rating than either Trump or Biden, with 20%. At the jump from the Democrats, 20% support from the Democrats, with an incredible name, and, you know, evoking, I'm going to bring the good old Democratic Party back to what it was, the Kennedy Democrats, my father and my uncle. That's a very powerful image, and it evokes a lot of very powerful feelings in America. So he's got a strong position in that, whatever the Democrats want to think, he's got a strong position that appeals to a lot of people, left and right, what's called left and right now, which is words that are used in the most ridiculous sense. But, you know, a lot of people, Democrat, Republicans, are saying, I might register as a Democrat to vote for vote for RFK. So he comes into that. Now, the institutional problem for the Democratic Party is, as I say, as long as they can keep Biden going, they'll keep Biden going, they'll shut everybody else out. But they themselves understand that's getting less and less likely. So they're preparing Gavin Newsom. I think Gavin Newsom is the guy they'd want to be plan B would be Gavin Newsom. Wilmer Leon suggests Whitmer which is not a bad idea, from Michigan, but I think they're going with Gavin Newsom, and they're going to prepare him for that. But replacing Joe Biden with anybody is going to open up the whole game, because once you've done that, you know, you can't say, well, now we can't talk about RFK or Marianne Williamson or Joe Schmo if he wants to be run for president. You can't lock them out. The only way you can do that is if you got Gavin Newsom installed as vice president before Joe Biden. I mean, it's the complications of doing this and getting rid of Kamala Harris, which nobody wants. Yeah. You know, I mean, the complications for the Democrats in doing this are going to be so difficult, and it's going to be ridiculous for everybody to see this. And in that context, who's got a better position than RFK Jr.? You know, and from the other point of view, you know, as a leftist and Marxist and a socialist, you know, I criticized RFK Jr. for his Zionism, which is clearly a lot of people on the left are surprised at that. I'm not surprised at all. That's standard default position for American politicians. But one of the things that he's also saying, RFK Jr. is not a leftist. He's not an anti-imperialist. He's not an anti-Zionist. So at the end of the day, if the Democratic Party is in crisis, and if they want to win, Now they may want to lose because the ship is going down. They don't want to be in it. So, but if they want to win, who is going to be able? And you know they're faced with this guy, so they didn't like his vaccine skepticism. But you know he's not really a leftist or anti-imperialist. He's an old-fashioned Democrat, and he's the only one who can, like Obama did, restore some credibility and appeal to the American project internationally. So I don't know. I mean, it's just the uncertainties and the shit that's going to hit the fan over the next 16 months is going to open up lanes for whatever. And he's in as good a position as anybody to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I'm thinking he could be a catalyst, not him himself as a person or a politician, but represent like a pole of attraction, a catalyst to maybe smash the Democratic Party. Maybe it's not even his intention, but he could be a focus of energy. It's interesting. What do you think of Cornel West?
Cornel, I know Cornel. We were together at Princeton, and he's a great guy. And I think Cornel's great to have in the race. Look, first of all, I'm not endorsing anybody, telling anybody whom to vote for president. Sure. I think voting for president is generally speaking a scam, but that's another issue. But it's great to have Cornel in the race. He's going to raise issues that RFK Jr. never will. He'll bring things to the fore. He's coming in. You know, 6% is very good to be coming in with that. I think Cornel. You know, it's Cornel's strength, and this is not a criticism. It's what I think. He's a preacher, you know, and there's a pole of attraction to that too. And he wants to be honestly sympathetic and talking to everybody. And I'm here to listen to you and to try and deal with your existential problems. It's a strong position to be in. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the Green Party. You know, they've had quite problematic developments, although they have, the reason he's doing it is because they have
ballot access,
established ballot access, and they have some elected representatives, so it's a party. You know, so great. Let's have Cornel and RFK Jr. go at it. Cornel is certainly much better position on Palestine and Israel than RFK Jr. I'm going to say, you know, it was interesting to me that RFK Jr. didn't agree to endorse Biden if he doesn't win. I think at the end of the day, he will. I don't think RFK Jr. is going to blow up the Democratic Party, although he's not out to do that. But I think one of the good things about having him in the race is that it does kind of blow up the whole party thing. Right now, he's kind of putting it into crisis and discombobulating. There was just an article in the Times about how they don't know what to do about Kennedy because he's probably going to win the primary in New Hampshire, and they don't want to have that primary. But can they stop it from happening? You know, all of this stuff.
He goes against narratives. Like he actually blames the CIA for killing his father and his uncle.
Yeah.
Ted Kennedy didn't want that. He squashed that, but and that's pretty far for a U.S. politician. And he criticizes the Ukraine war. He could be better in some ways, but he does criticize the proxy war, calls it a proxy war. He does go against narratives, and they don't like that.
No, absolutely not. And that's what they don't like about him. Cornel, of course, does too, even further to some extent. But I'm going to say I wonder, you know, in both cases, end of day, if they keep Biden in, and Biden is the nominee, and, you know, if the challenge to RFK Jr. is you get locked out by the Democrats, will you run a third party? You know, why don't you, if you really think these things are important? The other side for Cornel, I'm going to say, will Cornel, at the end of the day, will the Green Party do its safe states thing, which is, okay, you know, the main thing is we've got to stop Trump, you know, so we're going to not really in a safe. You can vote for me in a safe state, but you don't. You know, maybe you shouldn't vote for me in a swing state where it's important that Trump get defeated. So this is, to me, if you're running a third party, that's a third party of the left. You cannot do that if you're not willing to, you will never win an election until you make the Democrats lose.
Right.
You have to be willing to be the reason that the Democrats lose. You don't sit back, oh, it wasn't our fault that the Democrats lost. You know, even if we hadn't been in the race, the Democrats would have lost. No, you've got to be willing to say, we're fighting for these votes, and we're not favoring the Democratic Party over the Republican Party. We have our party, and we're the ones who, and the Democrats are causing us to lose. That's fair. That's their job, you know. So we're going to do the same thing. And I'm not sure that Cornel at the end of the day will not, and the Green Party will not play the safe states game if it's Biden versus Trump,
right?
Or Gavin Newsom versus Trump.
Right. Ajimu Baraka was kind of saying what you're saying. The Green Party has to be like proud of being a spoiler. That's what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I voted for Howie Hawkins last time. I actually thought he was a horrible candidate. I didn't like him. My state of Maine has ranked choice voting, so I voted for Gloria LaRiva, the PSL first choice, and Howie as my second choice. Howie Hawkins was not a great candidate, but Cornel will probably be better. He's not great on the vaccines. Like there was an interview, Pasta Jardula from the Convo Couch interview.
Yeah.
And I think that was a good way, or good journalism practice. Like he had this hard-hitting interview, but he wasn't antagonistic. Like it was a comradely interview. Like, yeah, I have disagreements, but I don't, he handled that very well. And Cornel may be evolving somewhat. I think he's a little cautious to hit that subject. Interesting. What's your take on Marianne Williamson?
Oh, Pasta, you're right. Pasta's interview with Cornel was an excellent interview. Really nicely done.
It was interesting. Yeah, it was very well done. Very well done. He's evolving into a really interesting journalist.
Yeah. I like him, and I like Fiorella. They're a good team, and that was really good.
That was amazing. Yeah.
Is Marianne Williams? Well, Marianne Williams is.
She's serious, or?
I think she's serious. I saw her give a really good answer yesterday about China. That was excellent in kind of a town hall thing where someone questioned her about China building military bases in Cuba or some kind of military facility. And she said, you got to wake up, essentially. How many military bases does the United States have around China? That was a really good response that she gave.
Yeah.
I think she's a spoiler. I think she's playing a more direct version of the sheepdogging game that Bernie played. I think at the end of the day, she's going to support the Democratic nominee, whoever it is.
Right.
And I think in the context of, again, what's going to give her some opening is RFK, because if the thing opens up in some way, then I think the Democrat establishment will promote her as an alternative to RFK, or at least to try and stop RFK. If they put Gavin Newsom in the mix, if they're going to present this thing with, RFK and Marianne Williams fighting each other on the fringe left, et cetera, and that's going to make Gavin Newsom into the moderate centrist candidate that appeal to everybody. So I don't know. I don't know to what extent she's. I think she's probably sincere, but I think she's also. She's definitely not going to do a third party. I don't think she's going to refrain from endorsing Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom if they're the nominee.
Yeah, I remember she actually said, when somebody asked her about it, she said, well, my campaign is all about fighting fascism that Trump represents.
Yeah.
And when it comes, he'll finally endorse Biden. There's a roundabout way of saying that. Yeah, she was on RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. I don't know if you saw that. They really slammed her. That was pretty wild. Now, I wonder, pivoting slightly, were you interested in your take on the Rage Against the War Machine anti-war demo, February 19th? I supported. I wasn't there, but I almost went. It's like a 9-hour bus ride from where I am right now. I've been to zillion demos in D.C. back in the day, early 2000s. But I supported. But some leftists were because libertarians were there, and the LaRouche organization was there. There were leftists who spoke. I followed a live stream. Jimmy Dore spoke, a bunch of other figures spoke. There was a lot of infighting among some of the organizers, like Scott Ritter was going to be there and he backed out, and Medea Benjamin, she wanted to go, but the organization wouldn't let her go and stuff. What's your take on that? Would it be appropriate for leftists to be involved in a coalition movement like that?
Sure, I have no problem with it. I mean,
yeah.
Look, there are single issue movements in the country. I support abortion rights. Am
Yeah.
I not going to get on the stage with a libertarian who supports abortion rights? I mean, there are single issue movements for things that are important. And it's precisely by engaging in those with people, it's not just the leadership of these movements either. There's a personality who's a libertarian or a personality who's a Trumper or whatever. But there are people, millions of people who listen and engage with those personalities, and you want to engage with that audience, and you want to say, look, here I am for this issue. We agree on this, and here's why I agree with this. And you're going to say something that maybe they didn't hear before. So this is the outreach. We do not have a left movement in this country. Anybody who thinks that we have some kind of massive powerful left movement that we have to protect from being infected by something else, by anything else, you got to build a left movement. We're in the stage of having to convince people out there who know or have nothing to do with or want nothing, they think they want nothing to do with and know nothing about what it is to be a leftist or a socialist, and are being told all kinds of crap about what that means to be a leftist or a socialist. And you've got to go out and engage with them and let them hear what you have to say, and then suddenly they'll say, oh, wait, this isn't what I expected, or I want to hear more about this. If you don't do that, we're never going to have a left movement in the country. So this is nuts, the idea that the way to build a left movement is to kind of define yourself and then protect yourself from infection or from having some kind of contact with these other people. This is nuts. This is, if we had a political party that was contesting for power, that had millions of working class people with it, and that was ready to fuck, then you'd have to, you have other kinds of issues about how what kinds of coalitions you make, etc. But this is a single issue about war, and you've got a lot of people all across the country who have no idea what left and right is and are being told stupid things about that, and you want them to stop this war. Hey, you go out and talk to them. I don't, this is, to me, this is, Jimmy Dore said it in a very nice way with the Amazon. This is not, and this is from a Marxist leftist point of view. This is exactly, it's not an analogy. This is what you do. The way you build a union is you don't sit around and say, these are the correct ideas. I have them in my head. Now I'm going to go to my fellow workers and say, do you agree with me on all these things? And if you agree with me, then I'll talk to you, and then we can do something together. No, you go to people and you say, we have this material interest in doing something. That's something we share. Let's work together to build on that. And then maybe people will change attitudes. You don't make a movement on the basis of attitudes. You make it on the basis of material interest first. And that's going to be the condition that's going to allow you to maybe have an effect and change people's attitudes about things. And you can't have a left movement. We don't. Everybody, Adolf Reed Jr. said, we do not have a left movement. We have the left wing of neoliberalism, which is identity politics, and we have right-wing capitalist ideology, Shark Tank ideology all over the place. And we have to build a left movement. I mean, it's been going on for a long, long time, and there used to be a left anti-war movement. There isn't. So you got to build an anti-war movement with what you got.
Yeah. Pastor Jardula again, he a couple months ago, he was at a libertarian convention, and he talked to had a debate with some of the leaders of this libertarian party, and he exposed the class contradictions. Libertarian philosophy does have a lot of innate contradictions, and there's a correct way for someone on the left to approach libertarians. like you call out their leadership, the more like a lot of people are libertarians are kind of on the left, like working class members. But then you get the Ayn Rand or Mises Institute people, von Mises people, and plus to cut right through that, he exposed like the class contradictions of libertarianism. I thought that was really interesting. Another question. This is odd. I'm not familiar with Caleb Maupin. He was, there's Magacommunism, or I don't know if that's serious or not. He was at a Trump rally when Trump was indicted, and he talked to people. Apparently, he tried to move them in the left direction. He thinks there's some kind of, he seems to think some kind of revolutionary socialist movement will come out of the MAGA crowd. I think it's pretty delusional. I think maybe we can get like a non-interventionist, not socialist, but non-interventionist movement from that crowd. But I'm even skeptical about that. What would you say about that crowd?
Yeah, I'm aware of this. I'm not following it very closely. The concept of MAGA communism. I mean,
yeah.
Look, here's the problem, and I did quote someone in one of my articles about. And it was a guy, it was a leftist, but it wasn't MAGA communist. That is totally shouldn't up. But he made the point the working class is moving to the Republican Party. Yeah. It may be easier to. Well, you may have to go into the Republican Party to talk to the working class. I mean, that is a kind of problem. At least you have to be willing to talk to them. I mean, whether you would, I don't believe entrees into the Republican Party is a good idea, and that's the point. I mean, you cannot support the Trump movement. This is a cult of personality movement. I mean, Trump just got up on stage and said we have to not only prevent Marxists and communists from coming into the country, but we have to go after the ones that are here. We have to make laws against them. So, Trump is an ass. He's a fool. There's 100,000 Trumps running around the cities of New York. My oldest brother was the guy, but he has an appeal because he tells it like it is. He crosses all kinds of red lines and is very, crosses the lines, isn't afraid to say what he feels, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's interesting from our point of view. You call Putin a killer? You don't think we've killed people?
Yeah,
that's what started this whole thing in the 2016 campaign. But anyway, but this is, behind that is a really reactionary idea of what the problem is and the solution is. The problem is, a lot of it is racist. We have too many, non-white people hanging around, and certainly is nationalist. And Trump's attitude toward the war and I would have solved this problem because I would have been more of a macho guy than Joe Biden. This is silliness. So I don't understand that. I understand the problem that the Democratic Party has chased the working class out of the party, and a lot of them feel they have nowhere to go. And there is a libertarian instinct that the Democratic Party has given up on entirely, which is a kind of general live and let live attitude, which I have a libertarian, and there are different versions of how societies are going to organize themselves in different ways, whether you're a socialist or a capitalist, according to the culture of the society. We have a very libertarian culture. That's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, in the general sense. Live and let live, free speech. We have more free speech codified in law than European countries, right? That's a good thing. So you've got to appeal to that, or you got to take a position on it, a reasonable position. But that's the kind of thing that, well, liberal Democrats used to stand up for free speech. Yeah. Now they don't stand up for that anymore. So you've got the working class movement, working class people who drift into the other alternative, which is, so there's a sense in which you have to engage with those people. And, even Bernie Sanders says that. I'm going to go talk to the Trumpers. Well, you have to, because there they are. I mean, you're not doing anybody a favor. You're doing yourself a favor. But, to identify yourself with the MAGA movement, whatever that is, that's because that's all centered around Trump as a personality, I think. So I don't see the point of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some people say that we have might say, you mentioned in the podcast with Wilmer Leon Garland Nixon that fascism is probably overused as a term, but we have maybe some people saying we have maybe security state fascism from on high. Like the Twitter files basically showed that the secret police were kind of running social media on behalf of the Democratic Party, and that's pretty disturbing. And then maybe we have vulgar fascism from below, like DeSantis in Florida and things like that. Would that be an accurate way of looking at it? And how should we orient towards the populist right? Is the fascist takeover, like liberals? I mean, Trump are really worried about fascism. It's probably an overused term. But is that a danger from like liberals or from the populist right?
Yeah, look, there's a use of the word fascism, which means generally authoritarian, highly authoritarian situation, highly authoritarian state apparatus. And in that respect, it's all over the place. I mean, what the Democrats, you could say what the Twitter files represents, this kind of censorship is fascistic. Okay, you can say what right-wing populism based on American exceptionalism and nationalism and undercurrents of racism is fascistic. Okay, this is a way of using the term fascism. And I think what has happened among the liberal Democrats since 2016 is that this is a way of asserting that Trump is Hitler, and we have to stop Trump. And the most important thing in the world is stopping Trump. And Trump. And no matter how bad the Democratic candidate, he's not a fascist. Because Trump's a fascist. So this is a word that's being used in the United States in a way that I think is phony. And fascism comes in under the guise of anti-fascism. This censorship regime is as proto-fascist as anything, and it's coming in under the guise of protecting us from Trump and protecting us from the fascists. So and the people, there's nobody who can claim to be an anti-fascist who doesn't first of all say fascists are in Ukraine. The Democratic Party, Joe Biden and Barack Obama put fascists. This is not a vague use of the term. These are political groups that fought with Hitler, that still have the ideology that Hitler was right and we were on his side. They're there as a response to Soviet communism, and they're anti-communist fascists. And there's no ambiguity about that term. They're not neo-Nazis, they're Nazis. And so if you're going to say I'm Antifa and I'm going to stop Donald Trump from talking, but if Barack Obama wants to get up and talk, I won't go and disrupt that, because wait a minute, Barack Obama and Joe Biden have done more to reinvigorate fascism, actual Hitlerian fascism in the world, than Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. And they don't even have, neither of them even can conceive of what that kind of fascism is, really. They're American right-wing reactionaries of the standard kind. So to me, and historically, I think one of the things that made fascism necessary for the ruling class in Germany was there was a strong working class communist and socialist movement. There was a communist post-capitalist Bolshevik country that was threatening their rule. And therefore, the ruling class had to promote fascism. Okay, we don't have that situation. The ruling class in the United States and Western Europe is not threatened by a working communist socialist working class movement. Not even in Europe anymore. So you have those in the absence of the ruling class. Do you think the ruling class in the United States wants to institute the Turner Diaries or, no, they don't. They like it just fine. They're controlling things through the Democrats and the Republicans just fine. They don't need fascism or want fascism in that Hitler, in that classical sense, because they're not threatened by a working class movement. And what this anti-fascist discourse in the United States is another way that they use to prevent the emergence of a real socialist working class movement, because all we got to think about is the Trump, fascist over there in the Republican Party, and you can't be wasting your time with other things, because the important thing is stop that.
Right.
So that's my take on that.
Yeah. Oh my God, Trump's a fascist. We have to vote for the Democrats no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wrote, pivoting slightly, you wrote some interesting stuff about the Ukraine war. You think right now it's entering a very dangerous situation, almost like the Cuban Missile Crisis right now. The Bakhmut battle for Bakhmut is over. The Wagner Group took Bakhmut. Right now, the Ukrainian offensive is not really going anywhere. They may have taken a few villages, but it's not really going anywhere. You talked about a while back the Chinese peace proposal, and I haven't followed it slightly. You said it wasn't exactly what people thought it was. More recently, Cyril Ramaphosa, president of South Africa, he went to war. So they treated him pretty horribly. They arrested his security, and he had to go on without. That was a mess. So, you think it'll reach a situation where Russia is winning gradually but slowly? Scott Ritter thinks it'll be over by the summer. And there's another guy, an American, I forget his name, American, who lives in Moscow. I wish I could remember his name, but he thinks he'll go on until like the next 10 years. It'll be a forever war. I really don't know. I think Scott Ritter is probably closer to the truth. But anyway, there's buzz going around about the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. They're going to do a false flag. Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham were kind of pushing some bill that would maybe invoke Article 5. Oh, it's just a mess. So what's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's extremely dangerous. I think the fundamental problem here is, as I've said, the basic question is who will accept defeat? NATO and the United States. Stoltenberg has said we cannot allow Russia to win. It would mean the defeat of NATO. And he's correct. It would undermine fatally NATO and the whole global US hegemony. They know that. They can't accept that. Russia cannot accept Poland, Ukraine as a member of NATO, de facto or de jure, which it was de facto, and which the Ukraine defense minister said, we are de facto a member of NATO. Ukraine had the best army in Europe, the most powerful army in Europe when Russia went in there, because NATO had built it up. And this is now clearly a proxy war between Russia and the US and NATO, which is the US at the end of the day. And one side or another, this is going to win. And the other side is going to be defeated. And neither side can accept this defeat. So either side is going to be, as I say, there's a 50-50 chance that any of those sides, Russia or the United States, which is facing defeat, will be tempted to use nuclear weapons. And the only side that really is going to be facing defeat is the US NATO side. This nonsense of Ukraine winning this war and Russia losing the war and Putin's on his last legs, and whether you like Russia or not, the Russians are outproducing. They have reorganized their industrial capacity. This is a war of attrition. Russia is producing millions of artillery shells. They're run out of artillery shells. NATO gave Ukraine every last bit of legacy Soviet weapons and material, and a lot of its weapons and material. Britain is saying we don't have enough artillery shells. The United States cannot produce the artillery. Nobody can produce the artillery shells that the Russians are now producing. This is the consequence of giving up, its industrial base, essentially. So Russia can't lose this war on conventional terms. It can't. Now they can lose it if they have seriously horrible military commanders, if Putin agrees to another phony negotiation, etc. But I very seriously doubt he's going to do that. I think we are facing the immediate threat of a false flag on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. I think Kiev wants to do that, and I'm sure that they've gotten a lot of pressure from European governments and the American government to say, certainly from the European governments, don't do that. And the only pressure that Kiev is going to listen to, however, is we're going to cut it off if you do that. If European governments or say to Zelensky, if Schultz or Macron say to Zelensky, if you false flag the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, we are going to say you did it, and we're going to stop supporting you. That's the only thing. But here's the problem that we're in now. Zelensky has everybody over a barrel himself because the Russians have the receipts on this. They have the initial document. They went into a negotiation with Zelensky. Zelensky went into a negotiation with Russia, and they initialed the draft document. And Boris Johnson flew over with the orders of the United States and said, if you sign this, we're going to punish you. We will cut you off. You will not have our support.
Right.
Just similar to what they did in Maidan, by the way, with Yanukovych. But this is in the war was going to end, and the United States and Britain said, "Don't sign this, or we'll cut off." But the other side of that coin, and Alexander Mercouris talks about this, and it's very important, is that the United States and Britain said to Zelensky, "If you don't sign it, we will give you everything you need to defeat the Russians." So now they're in a position. That's why Zelensky can keep coming back and say, now we want this, and now we want that. And the United States has to say, okay, because the United States thought at that point in April of 2022, Russia is going to be destroyed by our sanctions. Putin doesn't have support. The Russian people will rise up. This is all nonsense. None of this came true. The Russians built a better army and a bigger army. Putin has 90% support. It was 80% before the Prigozhin incident. Then it became 90%. Yeah. So the country is doing fine. They're producing. This is what other countries in the world have seen. We don't really have to be that afraid of the United States anymore. Sure, it can hurt us, but we can get along. And Russia has done it. So they're now in a situation where Zelensky is saying to them, you have to give me everything I want, because I would have been out of this war a year and a half ago. I would have been out of this war with 200,000 fewer dead. So they're caught in this situation where, if you don't give me everything you want, I'm going to tell the world that that's what you did. and so Zelensky is got them over a barrel. And I just don't see them giving, and the Russians aren't going to give up. The Russians are going to, I may be wrong. Maybe Putin will fall for it. I think immediately what's going to happen in the next few months, it's going to be clear that the Ukrainian army is incapable of defeating the Russians, and can be defeated by the Russians. We haven't even seen a tenth of what the Russian army can do. They're building this up in the background. And I think the Russians, I think they should, from their point of view, and probably will go on an offensive that will demonstrate that nothing can stop them. At that point, in fact, before that, I think once the Ukrainian army is defeated in this counteroffensive, all of these neocons and Blinken, will never have a ceasefire, we will not negotiate, they will suddenly become Mr. Negotiation. Now we have to negotiate. Now we have to have a ceasefire. They're going to try and prevent a Russian offensive, and they're going to do that by becoming the peacemakers. You're right. We need to have a ceasefire. We need to freeze this conflict. People have to stop dying. Negotiation rather than escalation. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's draw up line. They're going to try and turn it into Korea 2.0 or the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or Syria, where we don't really resolve things. We just, let everybody de facto control what they control, and the rest of it will go on talking forever and rebuilding the Ukrainian army. And Russia, will either fall for that or they won't. I do not think they will. But American and Western, more or less pacifists, got themselves in the position where, we want a ceasefire. Yeah, we have to negotiate rather than escalate. So this is really going to be a difficult. The neocons are going to put themselves right in that position and try and stop the Russian offensive. But the problem is, the fascists in Ukraine don't want any frozen ceasefire either. They don't. For anybody, they talk about fascism. The fact is, this is the most difficult thing that Russia puts on the table. You got to denazify Ukraine. But the fact is that if the United States wants to have any kind of resolution or pseudo-resolution less than the defeat of Russia, they're going to have to denazify Ukraine because the Nazis in Ukraine won't put up with it. So it's extremely difficult situation. And if Russia doesn't lay down for some kind of ceasefire and armistice for everything, which I think, and we'll just have a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine, put some peacekeeping troops in Western Ukraine, which is really a last bastion of defense for Kiev. Russia puts up with that, then they're foolish and they're going to go on. It's going forever. But if they don't and they carry out an offensive, what is the United States going to do? There will be no conventional way that the United States can have Ukraine defeat Russia in a conventional war. So there's where you're going to have the United States, NATO being the ones who are going to say, we have to use tactical nuclear weapons. And I'll say this is worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis because, right now, both parties are in ongoing combat. I just saw a tweet this morning of an American leading a tank incursion in the Ukraine war. Some Americans speaking, telling them what to do. It's worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis because the president today is Joe Biden, not John Kennedy, and it's worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis, most profoundly, because the damn neocons, as I say, they're still partying like it's 1999. They think not only is the United States omnipotent, but Russia is weak and afraid, and we can escalation dominate. If we push a button, if we can start the war and we can stop the war. They think they can stop the war on command. They think if they sit down, okay, now let's have a ceasefire. Russia will not dare refuse that because who would refuse stop fighting the Americans? And that's where they're wrong. And they think that Russia, they thought they went into this thinking they would get away with the sanctions and economically and militarily Russia is weak. It is not. And it's not afraid. It understands there's a danger to this, but it's going to push for what it thinks are its minimum security requirements. And getting NATO out of Ukraine is one of them. Getting NATO out, not hanging around forever in Western Ukraine. Getting them out, period. So this is, it's an extremely, extremely dangerous situation, and I put the odds of nuclear war at 50%.
Right. I remember you wrote an article about that back in September or October. Yeah. I read that article at work. I actually had trouble sleeping that night after I read your article. And at least back in the Cuban Missile Crisis, at least Kennedy and Khrushchev were talking to one another. At least now they're not even doing that.
It's the respect. Nobody talked about Russia as a gas station with nuclear weapons in 19. That was everybody's going to get blown up. People were afraid of nuclear war. Now it's since the disappearance of the Soviet Union, it's like, we're the only hyperpower and we can bully everybody into doing, and they did for 20 years, bully everybody into doing everything. Russia and China went along voted with the Americans in the United Nations on the Libyan situation, but that's been turning around since Syria, and this is over. And the United States foreign policy neocon apparatus doesn't really get it yet that you cannot bully everybody in the world. They're not afraid of you anymore.
Right, Stephen. It's interesting. Yeah, it's a dangerous situation. What's your take on the Prigozhin affair? Scott Ritter seems to think he was a traitor, basically. I kind of agree. I tend to agree with Scott Ritter, but there are a zillion different theories about what was going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, under any conventional understanding, he was a traitor. I mean, in the middle of a war, he came up and had an armed battalion of people trying to essentially overthrow the
government,
defense ministry, at least. To take control. If you say who's going to be the defense minister and the chief of staff of the army, you're taking control of the army and of the state. So that you can't do that. I mean, there's no state in the world would allow that to happen. Would not consider him a traitor. There are a number of things that again, I refer you to Alexander Mercouris and Andrei Martyanov, and the whole issue of what the Wagner organization is much more complicated than I understood. But basically, I think at the end of the day, and Prigozhin, it was not a military guy. He's a dark tank guy, And he had $1 billion of contracts with the Russian government. And the Russian government was more than a little pissed off at the games he played in Bakhmut, which really involved attacking the defense ministry again and saying they're not giving us enough stuff. Blah, blah. There was a whole thing about what the Russians actually wanted to do in Bakhmut, and he pushed them to do more than they actually wanted to, and then attacked them for not supporting him enough. So they were finished. They were fed up with Prigozhin. And there was an issue of whether these contracts, which were going to be up on July 1st, whether the contract with him and Wagner was going to be re-upped and re-signed. So he was worried about losing $1 billion contract. And there's all kinds of, one of the things you see here, again, I do think this is an example of, people who do political analysis are rational people, and they try to make everything into a rational situation. And that's a rational reason that I'm going to lose my contract. But it's not really a rational reason. You're not going to get the damn contract. You're not going to win. What do you think you're going to do by marching these people into Rostov-on-Don and then trying to march? They have surrounded Rostov-on-Don with 30,000 Chechen soldiers who were going to go in. They were surrounded. They weren't going anywhere. They met, 2,500 Spetsnaz soldiers on the road to Moscow. Where were they going to go? They weren't going to win. So you have to. This is a lesson, I think, and people haven't understand that. Even in the highest level, and it's a terrible thing to say, the highest level geopolitical thing. You get a guy in a position who is psychologically a narcissist and doesn't understand. He gets enough people around him, and people can do that. Religious leaders do it all the time, and military leaders. Yeah, I got 5,000 people who are going to go with me. We're going to march on Moscow, and you can make a lot of trouble, but you're not going to win. You're not going to get what you want. So this is an example of kind of things that you can't rationalize. There's an irrational thing going on here, which nobody in their right mind could do the calculation and say, this is how I'm actually going to get what I want. But he's not in his right mind, and he's persuasive enough to get 5,000 people to follow him. And so at the end of the day, he didn't have any backing whatsoever from the army, from the political class, from the population, from the punditry, from whatever. Everybody said, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah. Scott Ritter pointed out. He said that some members of U.S. Congress were told this was going to happen 8 days before it occurred. He seems to think the CIA, or say MI6, had some involvement. He might have been working, and he went against the Russian narrative. The Russia said that like the 130,000 troops massed on the Donbass, ready to invade the Donbass. Prigozhin said, "No, it's not true. That's not true," which is probably nonsense. But so he probably was working for the other. Somebody bought him out. It's probably really more complicated than that. But
that's, to me, that's the simplest thing. He was bought up by the Americans or the Russians. But I think it's personal narcissism. As you say, he changed his story 15 times when he wanted to say, "Oh, I'm only against the Shoigu and Gerasimov." Then, but then that day of of his insurrection, it was, "Oh no, this whole thing shouldn't have happened. But there was no real threat on the Donbass." That's just saying what he thinks he needs to say in the context because he thinks he's going to get over with by saying that. He's not. If this were an operation instigated by MI6 or something, that at least has some political sense to me. But and I'm sure that if they knew about it, they might have known about it. They might have given some kind of implicit or through channels some kind of encouragement for it. But I don't think they really planned it. But who knows? But it was over in a day. And it didn't hurt Putin at all. He demonstrated his strength.
Right, came out with a 90% approval rating. U.S. media were cheering this on. They were hoping it was going to be a civil war in Russia. It turned out to be just nothing burger, just passed right like that. That was interesting. What's your take on France, the unrest on France and the recent youth uprising? Is it going to be a revolution in France? I don't know if there's revolutionary leadership from the left. French people are always doing it. So French working class has always been very militant. whether maybe it's a pre-revolutionary climate, whether there would be an actual revolution is another thing. France has always been in this situation.
Well, no, I don't. There is not a revolutionary party. There is not a left party that's organized that's capable of contesting for state power or contesting for the control of the society and the economy. So, it's an uprising. In this case, it's got much of the elements of a George Floyd type uprising, because this is the banlieue, the immigrant families and the children of immigrants who are treated like shit, and who live in what we call projects in the United States that are deliberately designed to keep them out of the cities, et cetera, and they're treated like shit. So this is a George Floyd type uprising. But there's always in France going to be other things. I mean, we had hundreds of thousands of people for the yellow vests. We had hundreds of thousands of people for the pension reforms out in the streets. They weren't angry in the way that these immigrant family kids are angry and pissed off. And so it's a dangerous situation. It's part of the problematic of not just immigration, but the extent to which immigrant communities are assimilated into the country or are treated like shit once they get in the country. And not only for a short period of time, and this is generations of people who are treated like this. So, it's an uprising, but it demonstrates again that France, is not something is wrong, deeply wrong when you have this happening. Neoliberalism, what's the cause of immigration? What's the cause of this desperation? What's the cause of this clivage, this split in society between working class and the elite, and between these banlieue population of the banlieue and the professional managerial strata, etc. These are all, fundamental failings of neoliberal society that are on display, and they're not going away. And so I don't know who's going to replace Macron. I don't know if Macron's going to last through this, or who's going to replace him. And unfortunately, this is not a revolution.
Yeah, right. Okay, interesting. Finally, one more, ending back to U.S. domestic politics. There's the transgender debate. Huge, trans people are a small part of the U.S. population, but it's become kind of an odd cultural wedge issue. It's receding somewhat, but there's been a huge amount of, it's really like a wedge issue in U.S. politics, which is kind of came from out of nowhere. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it came out very quickly.
Like
the things that are real issues, that are going to be real issues, and that are going to be nicely function as wedge issues, are things having to do with kids. Period. Right. Whether not just having to do with kids. The worst, the most nastiest wedge issue is going to be things having to do with kids. Do children, is it okay to provide puberty blockers and anatomical surgery to minors just on the basis of their affirmation that they want it? And the other thing is the participation of biological males in women's sports. And these are things that everybody, that are easy to make wedge issues. They are wedge issues. They're bizarre issues. Nobody ever thought about this before. Suddenly, this is a significant question, and that has to be answered. I do not support this, and I'll give you my answer to it. I do not support the participation of biological males in women's sports. I think it is going to destroy what the wonderful results of Title IX and the absolute wonderful explosion of women's sports as a serious endeavor for girls and women. And I do not support the self-affirming, the kids affirming themselves into serious hormonal, life-changing pharmaceutical or surgical interventions. Consenting adults can do what they want. But so these, but you know, it's an issue.
Yeah.
People are gonna have arguments about it.
Sure. It came from out of nowhere. Like people never even heard of it, or now came from out of nowhere in the past year. It's like it's used as a wedge issue. It's kind of interesting. It's odd. Well, okay. I can't think of anything else. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No. We get another one before the world blows up. That's all.
Yeah, yeah. Hope the world doesn't blow up. Okay, so you can be reached at you have a Substack at the Polemicist, and also on Wilmer Leon and Garland Nixon.
Critical Hour. I'm on the Critical Hour. You
Critical Hour.
Substack, and on follow me on Twitter at the Polemicist _.
Okay.
And on my Substack, Jim Kavanagh Substack, the Polemicist, and you'll see everything I have to say there.
Okay, and you have a YouTube channel and a Rumble channel as well.
No, I'm just starting this. I just did a couple of things on Rumble. I'm going to, as you say, I probably will cross post them on YouTube, but I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, Rumble is easier to use. I found it's easier to upload stuff. Rumble, YouTube seems to take forever. It's my software I use, but okay. Well, thank you very much. And
thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.